The committee will come to order. Today we will hear from Congressman Billy Long, who is nominated to serve as Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. Congressman Long, congratulations on your nomination, and thank you for your willingness to serve in government again. The IRS is responsible for helping American taxpayers understand and meet their tax responsibilities, and to enforce the law with integrity and fairness to all. As outlined in the Internal Revenue Code, the Commissioner's job is to oversee tax administration for the federal government, enforce tax laws, and ensure compliance while balancing taxpayer service, fairness, and efficiency. In recent years, these needs have not been sufficiently balanced, and the IRS has suffered from many problems and missteps. Perhaps that is why Americans consistently rate it as one of the least favorable federal agencies, notwithstanding the fact that nearly all Americans must interact with it. We hear time and again about IRS efforts to improve taxpayer services, boost employee morale, and modernize outdated systems. The last administration dedicated billions of dollars of extra funding to this end, but actual improvement at the IRS ran short. This is in no small part due to the outsized emphasis on increased funding for enforcement, which dwarfed funding for IT modernization and customer service improvements. Further, the IRS diverted resources and attention to duplicative and unnecessary side projects, such as when the IRS circumvented Congress to create the unauthorized direct file program. The Trump administration is rightly calling for a re-examination of this program as a part of its broader goal to eliminate wasteful spending at the IRS. While critics argue that fiscal prudence at the IRS harms tax collection, in fact, the opposite has proven to be true. For example, concerns that tax receipts would be down this year. Individual income tax and payroll tax receipts are $120 billion higher this year than last year, and statistically in line with projections made by the Congressional Budget Office in January 2025. Agency improvements do not require tens of billions of dollars in additional funding, but better prioritization and execution. Modernization could also enable the IRS to become more efficient, reducing its annual funding needs. With an IRS on a healthier spending glide path and a renewed focus toward efficiently serving taxpayers, it is now time for the next IRS commissioner to prioritize taxpayers. My conversations with Congressman Long assured me that once confirmed, he will focus on improving taxpayer services, enforcing our tax laws with fairness for all, and ensuring resources are optimally allocated. President Trump called Congressman Long the consummate people person. Congressman Long is very clear that he will make himself available to all IRS employees, no matter their seniority. Moreover, he wants to implement a top-down culture change at the agency. This sea change will benefit American taxpayers who too often view the IRS as foe rather than friend. Congressman Long knows from years of experience in the House that to be a successful commissioner, he must be a valuable partner in Congress's efforts to ensure that new tax legislation is implemented and administered as Congress intends it to be. I'm also confident that he will be fully transparent and responsive to Congress and the American people. Before concluding, I would be remiss if I did not thank Mr. Falconer for his time spent as acting commissioner. We want him to return to the job he was confirmed to do as we now turn to hear from Congressman Long. American taxpayers want a change at the helm of the IRS, a change agent at the helm of the IRS. Congressman Billy Long fits this description and is well suited to lead the IRS at this moment in time. Congressman Long, thank you again for your willingness to return to government, and I look forward to working with you if confirmed. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Along with Senator Bennett, I serve on the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence. And as a result of this position, I have access to a tremendous array of secrets, enormous challenges for the country, and I have been able to excavate the news that today is Senator Crapo's birthday. So we're going to have a spirited hearing.
Thank you very much, Senator Wyden.
We salute our colleague as we begin. It's clear that Donald Trump sees the IRS as a tool that he can use to help himself, his friends, and hurt his enemies. To run the IRS, he's chosen Billy Long, one of his earliest supporters in Congress. At this morning's hearing, I assume we'll hear a lot of sweet-sounding promises about enhancing fairness and efficiency at the IRS and working together to improve morale. Here's the problem. Donald Trump is only concerned about his own power. Congressman Long is a MAGA devotee who claims that he coined the phrase Trump train. So when Donald Trump says he wants to weaponize the IRS, there is no evidence that Congressman Long will be making a bold stand in front of the locomotive to protect the agency's independence. The nominee's record on tax issues is thin. There was a bill to abolish the IRS and institute a nationwide sales tax. There were demands for investigations of the Humane Society and the Clinton Foundation. Not much else. If you expand the enemies list, that's the bulk of the Trump tax agenda in a nutshell. Much of Congressman Long's experience with taxes came after he left Congress, when he dove headlong into the tax scam industry. Cashing in on the credibility of his election certificate, he raked in referral fees, steering clients to firms that sold fake tax shelters and pushed small businesses to unknowingly commit tax fraud. So I'm going to take these cases one at a time. Congressman Long's financial disclosure shows $65,000 in income paid by a firm called White River Energy. Financial advisors at White River sold investors tax shelters known as tribal tax credits. The thing is, no such tax credit exists. It was a fraud. Finance Committee staff asked the IRS about these credits, and here's what the IRS told us, and I quote directly. We can confirm that these tax credits do not exist. Taxpayers who claim credits that don't exist are subject to penalties and possible examination. Furthermore, promoters of these credits may be subject to civil or criminal penalties. That is the end of the quote from the IRS. Committee investigators sought an explanation from Congressman Long about his role in this scheme. He refused to answer. Investigators sent a long list of questions to White River. No reply. It looks to me like practically everybody went into some kind of witness protection program. That said, there's a follow the money angle here as well. And the sequence of events is particularly troubling. Donald Trump announced the congressman's nomination on December 4th. On December 19th, Bloomberg published an article about White River's scheme. It was called Rich People Buy Tribal Tax Credits Treasury Says Don't Exist. White River's phone lines must have blown up. The CFO, Jay Puchier, held a call that same afternoon with 100 or more investigators who were questioning the legitimacy of the tax credits they'd been sold. Mr. Puchier didn't have a lot to offer in the way of assurances that the tribal tax credits were legitimate. But he did tell them they'd soon have friends at the IRS who'd take the heat off. Then, in mid-January, the folks down at White River decided it was time to whip out their checkbooks and start donating to the congressman's long-dormant Senate campaign. It still had outstanding debt dating back 2.5 years. More than $165,000 poured into campaign coffers, the vast majority of it from tribal tax credit promoters, including those at White River. Out of that total, $130,000 went directly into the congressman's pockets when he paid back his personal loans. Colleagues, this just looks corrupt, and I've asked the IRS to investigate. But that's not the only tax scam the committee needs to address. Back in the darkest days of the pandemic, the Congress created a program called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. It was designed to help struggling small businesses stay afloat. It made a lot of sense then. It saved jobs at a time when the unemployment rate was in the stratosphere. The problem arrived after the pandemic receded. That's when a whole bunch of scam artists twisted the program into a fire hose of fraud. Promoters set up mills that told small businesses to claim the credit even when they knew these businesses didn't qualify. The mills took a cut of the benefit. The congressman worked as a promoter for a few of these mills. Lifetime Advisors and Commerce Terrace Consulting was one. He spoke publicly in recorded interviews about pushing small business clients to file ERTC claims that their CPAs told them they did not qualify for. In one such appearance, he stated that, quote, everybody qualifies, and that, colleagues, is just untrue. The nominee bragged about getting this emergency tax credit for a funeral home, despite the fact that the business was booming for funeral homes during the pandemic. Taxpayers have lost billions and billions of dollars to improper claims and outright fraud with the ERTC. In all likelihood, my guess is some of that could have wound up in the congressman's pockets. These ERTC mills that push clients into making improper claims have put these small business owners in serious legal jeopardy. That, in my view, is unforgivable, and somebody who's been involved in that has no place working at the IRS. Finally, Finance Committee investigators gave the congressman and the firms he partnered with the opportunity to prove that everything they did was on the level. They refused. So, colleagues, I'll just say, I wish the hearing could be about improving efficiency and taxpayer service. But that kind of discussion is sort of out of touch, given what I have just described here this morning. Donald Trump wants to use the IRS as a cudgel to beat his adversaries into submission. He wants to feed its legally protected data to mass squads of agents disappearing people off the streets. His nominee to lead the agency is a Trump loyalist through and through, not somebody who is an independent tax professional. And our serious concerns that we have asked, and a number of colleagues have done so, about Congressman Long's involvement with fraudulent tax schemes have gone unanswered. So today, the American people have the right to know whether their future IRS commissioner is somebody who's been a crook. That's what our focus ought to be. I look forward to question and answers.
Thank you, Senator Wyden. In a moment, our colleague, Senator Blackburn, will introduce Congressman Long before he proceeds with his opening statement. First, Congressman Long, I have 4 obligatory questions that we ask all nominees before the committee. Number 1, is there anything that you are aware of in your background that might present a conflict of interest with the duties of the office to which you've been nominated?
No.
Number 2, do you know of any reason, personal or otherwise, that would in any way prevent you from fully and honorably discharging the responsibilities of the office to which you have been nominated?
No.
Number 3, do you agree without reservation to respond to any reasonable summons to appear and testify before any duly constituted committee of Congress if you are confirmed?
Yes.
And finally, do you commit to providing a prompt response in writing to any question addressed to you by any senator of this committee?
Yes.
Thank you. And with that, Senator Blackburn, we will turn to you for your introduction.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to introduce my former House colleague, Representative Billy Long. I grew to know him as a tireless advocate for the American people as we served in the House. And we were both members of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and we repeatedly saw his infectious energy, his conviction to serve people and to be unshakable in that commitment. And today, I know he is going to bring that same energy and conviction and spirit to his nomination as Commissioner of the IRS. What he will do is bring a fresh and much-needed perspective to the IRS. Before entering public service, he was a small business owner and a professional auctioneer, careers that grounded him in the real-world challenges that everyday small business owners and millions of Americans face. These experiences, combined with his time in Congress, give him a uniquely valuable lens through which to view the IRS. He understands that the IRS is not just a tax collector, but also a public-facing service agency that must be efficient, transparent, and accountable. He is upbeat, driven, relentless in his pursuit of results, and knows how to rally people around his cause. His vision is not just about fixing what's broken, it's about transforming the IRS into an agency that works for the people, not against the people. He has always put taxpayers first. His approach is rooted in that belief that the tax system should be fair, simple, and transparent. He's been a staunch advocate for reforms that cut red tape, improve communication, and restore trust between the IRS and the public that it serves. Representative Long knows how to connect with people, whether he's engaging with constituents or stakeholders. His personable nature and open communication style will make the IRS more accessible and responsive to the American taxpayer. But perhaps what's most important is his drive for fundamental change. The IRS is at a crossroads, and we need a leader who doesn't just talk about modernization, but who can get the job done. He is that leader. He understands that reform is just not about modernization, but also about improving the work culture and the trust the American people hold for the IRS. His long list of accolades includes the Tax Fighter Award from the National Tax Limitation Committee, the National Auctioneers Association Hall of Fame induction, and even the Order of the Rising Sun from the Emperor of Japan, just to name a few. The IRS desperately needs a fresh start, reform, it needs bold leadership, and it needs someone who understands how to work with people and for the American people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Blackburn. Congressman Long, please proceed.
Thank you. Chairman Crapo, Ranking Member Wyden, and members of the committee. I'm honored to be here today as a nominee for the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service. I want to thank President Trump for believing in me to lead this important agency. And I know there's been some confusion, but I'm not the one big beautiful bill that he has spoken about. He might be one big beautiful Billy, but not the bill. To paraphrase Lou Gehrig, I sit here today as the luckiest man in the world. I have the opportunity to make real transformational change to an agency that needs it more than any other federal agency. Or I can go back home to Southwest Missouri where the fish are biting, and as they say, they ain't going to catch themselves. So I feel lucky on either side. I'll be the first elected official in 60 years to be Commissioner of the Internal Revenue Service, and the first one to only be 2.5 years out of Congress. Now, why is this important? It's important because for too long, Congress has made changes to the tax code, and then the IRS spends months, if not years, trying to interpret what Congress meant. By being familiar with the workings of Congress, the IRS can stay engaged as these changes are made, so once they get over to the IRS, we will have a comprehensive understanding of Congress's intent. Now, here's something you'll find I'm an unusual congressman. Everybody said I was the most unusual congressman because things come into my head, pop up, ideas, things that I think can improve situations. I don't know any other IRS commissioner that's ever made this proposal, but I have pledged to arrive 90 minutes before the office opens every single day, to let anyone in the facility on my schedule for 10 minutes in the morning to tell me what's going on in their life, what's going on at the IRS, and how to improve things. We have to listen. I think there's a lot of wasted brain cells over in the building because no one has ever asked them for their opinion on how to make things better, make it a better place for them to work, and a better place to serve the American public. My two main concerns will be my employee partners at the IRS and the hardworking American taxpayers who deal with them. I don't want either one in that equation to be intimidated by the other side. In Congress, I had as many Democrat friends as I did Republicans. I would encourage any of you who have reservations about how I operate to walk the halls of Congress, where I was for 12 years. This isn't since December 5th or 4th to now. This is over the last 12 years, to talk to the Democrats over there and see how I served and what I'm like, what things that we worked on together. You can talk to Doris Matsui, Debbie Dingell, Brendan Boyle, they're just on and on and on. Mark Takano. Now, Diana DeGette, I'm going to talk about Diana for just a second here, but Diana DeGette and I co-chaired the Congressional Study Group on Japan and led a bipartisan delegation there for 5 years in a row. Very good friends with Prime Minister Abe, and we had Diana and I would walk in a room over there and we'd be rock stars. They'd be hollering, Diana, Diana, Billy, Billy, Billy. And, but if you're gonna represent and see some of the allies we have around the world, you gotta go, you gotta have boots on the ground. Now, some congressmen wouldn't go. They say, oh no, it'll hurt me politically. I can't travel. The people think I'm traveling on their dime and everything. But I took Joe Kennedy and his wife to meet his aunt when she was ambassador to Japan. But I'd say Diana DeGette would be a good one to ask, who I served. And in this committee alone, out of 20, what is there, 27 people on the committee, I think? 27 people, 9 I worked with in the House. Ben Ray Lujan, I was really upset with him when I went to his office because he always wears a bolo tie. So I wore the bolo tie that Jim McDermott gave me. And Jim and I were very good friends. And Ben Ray didn't have his bolo tie on that day. But there's so much we can accomplish together. And I'm going to have a good time today. I hope you all do. I'm going to have a good time. And congressmen say, oh, well, I appreciate that question. And nominees, and when I have an opportunity, I'd like to come to your office and work with you on an issue. If I tell you that, I mean it. I want to come to your office. I want to sit down. You'll have my cell phone. I'll be the most open. I used to teach a class on UFOs. Upbeat, friendly, and open. And that's how I always live. My staffs in the House used to say, other staff members would come up and they say, your boss just talked to me in the hall. Your boss just spoke. I speak to everybody. Like I said, I'm a people person, like the president said. And again, I appreciate the president nominating me for this position, but I want to make it a better place for the employees by meeting, who's going to come in 90 minutes early every single day and let people get on their calendar. I talked to one guy at the Treasury, and he had been at the IRS before, and I said, well, when you're over there, take a couple of pictures of the commissioner's office. I just want to see the layout, how it is, so I kind of know. I like to have large conference tables so we can bring people in and talk. And he looked at me and he said, Billy, I was there 15 years and I've never been invited up to the 3rd floor, never been invited up to the commissioner's office. To me, that's stinking thinking. And I want to change that at the IRS. And you got to look, do a Ben Franklin, how Ben Franklin would draw a line down the page and he put pluses and minuses. You got to look at the pluses as for me to take this position, which I haven't found any yet. But the minuses are like 17 things long. So you got to ask why I want this job. I want it because I care about people. I did talk radio for 6 years and there wasn't a week went by that I didn't say you can call the IRS on 5 days in a row with the same question and get 6 different answers. and nothing's changed about that. So I've been watching and I pledged to get around the country. Charles Rossetti told me that he was nominated by Clinton. He was a Republican, but he had to have a Republican to get by a Republican Senate back in those days. And Charles, if you go to ChatGPT and say who's considered the best IRS commissioner of all time, it's Charles Rossetti, and he told me, he said, Billy, get out of the office, go to all these, and I'll do the same 90-minute trick every office I go to around the country. But I would love to serve. I know that I'm going to get a lot of questions today, and that's fine. But ran into Sherry Bustos at a restaurant the other day, and she told her group, she said, nobody doesn't like Billy Long. Now, I want her to say that after this next 2 hours, because I think there'll be a lot of people who don't like Billy Long. I yield back.
Thank you very much, and I'll start with the questions. And Congressman Long, I have a number of questions for you, but first I want to confirm a few basic facts. So because of time constraints, I ask you to just give me yes or no responses to the next few questions. Have you ever met or interacted with anyone who works at White River?
No, sir.
Was your role with respect to all of your tax advisory work solely limited to provide referrals to other professionals like those at Lifetime Advisors, Capital Edge Strategies, and Commerce Terrace Consulting?
Yes.
Did you ever provide or attempt to provide tax advice?
No.
When referring to a potential client to others, did you always specify that they should have their own business, legal, or accounting counsel involved in any discussions or negotiations?
Yes.
With respect to clients, you referred to Capital Edge Strategies. You relied on a description of credits provided to you by Capital Edge, and at the time of referral, you were not aware of any facts to indicate or suggest the credits did not exist, correct?
Yes.
Turning to your campaign debt, you disclosed that matter to the Federal Election Commission, correct?
Yes.
Fully aware of your business arrangements, the Career Office of Government Ethics OGE staff prepared an ethics agreement with you to provide any and all potential to address any and all potential conflicts of interest, and you intend to completely abide by the terms of that letter, correct?
Yes.
Thank you. The next question I have for you, you can go beyond yes or no if you'd like. The mission statement of the IRS charges its employees to provide America's taxpayers top quality service by helping them understand and meet their tax responsibilities and enforce the law with integrity and fairness for all. American taxpayers expect that the IRS will live up to its mission statement on administering tax law fairly and impartially, regardless of one's political affiliation, which I can say is unfortunately not something most Americans believe is always true. Can you share your thoughts on how vital it is for the IRS to uphold that standard of fairness and impartiality while administering the tax code, and what will you do to uphold that standard?
Fairness is one of the main drivers of what needs to be done with the IRS. Make sure we treat everyone fair, regardless of their income level or who they deal with. And there's no room in my IRS to do anything other than treat everyone fairly and follow the law. I will follow the law and do exactly what it calls for.
All right, thank you very much. Given your service in Congress, you're uniquely aware of how important it is to have open and regular communication between the executive branch agencies and their respective congressional committees of jurisdiction. Given the significance of tax policy and its administration, it's critical that the IRS is transparent with Congress. If confirmed, will you commit to provide prompt and thorough feedback to the members of the Senate Finance Committee?
Yes.
That concludes my questions. Senator Wyden.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman and colleagues, let me just stipulate for purposes of this morning that this witness is a very entertaining individual. That's not what is at issue this morning. What's at issue are the facts, and that's what I want to go through with you, Mr. Long. After leaving the Congress, you made $65,000 referring your friends to tax promoters who claimed that they acquired income tax credits issued to a Native American tribe and then sold these credits to investors. There's a problem. The IRS said in March that the credits do not exist. They're fake. They are a scam. Now you're asking to be put in charge of the IRS, and the IRS confirms that these aren't real. Tell the committee, do you believe these so-called tribal tax credits actually exist?
Thank you for the question. My only involvement in this matter, like I've said numerous times in the written correspondences back and forth with members of the committee, was to connect interested friends of mine, not robocall, not paying kids $25 an hour to call, but just friends. If they had any interest, then I would say, do you want to get on a Zoom? And I was never on the Zoom.
That's not my question. My question is,
I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Do you believe that these so-called tribal tax credits actually exist? That's yes or no.
I do. I can't answer yes or no because I do not know. I think the jury's still out on that. I know since 2022 they've been accepting them, so now they claim that they're not and they haven't been. So I think that all this is going to play out, and I want to have it investigated just as you do. I know you're very interested in this subject. I am too. Well,
I released a recording of an investor call on the scheme last week. One person on the call said they had sold $20 million worth of credits and they'd all been rejected by the IRS. So can you name a single Native American tribe that you or any other promoter acquired these tribal tax credits from?
I worked through Capital Edge Strategies. I didn't work through, I've never talked to anybody at White River. I don't even know anybody at White River, and I don't have any way to know who the tribe is even.
Well, most of your experience with tax involves selling tax shelters that don't exist for a Native American tribe that you can't name, and that's what I'm troubled by. So let's go now to the question of pay to play. In the past year, you made $65,000 referring clients to promoters of what appears to be this fraudulent tribal tax credit. The President announced your nomination on December 4th. Within a matter of weeks, that same tribal tax creditor group of promoters contributed $165,000 to your old campaign, even though you left office years ago. You then transferred the money from the campaign to your pocket. After you were nominated to be IRS commissioner, who did you talk with to solicit those $165,000 in donations?
You know as well as I do that anytime you're dealing with the FEC, you have to follow FEC guidelines, and that's exactly what I did all the way through.
I want to know who you talked with.
You have to report these things, and it comes out exactly. If I thought something was wrong with it, I sure wouldn't.
Congressman, money doesn't just fall out of the sky. You had to talk to somebody. So who did you talk to about the $165,000? And if it's relevant, did
everyone that I talked to and everyone that I dealt with or didn't talk to was FEC compliant, sir.
Can we get a list of those you talked to?
I gave it all to I gave everything to the FEC. So the FEC, everything we did was compliant with their regulations.
So you just expect us to believe that the money just fell out of the sky and it showed up in your campaign treasury? I just find that a little bit implausible. And let's go on to the next one, promoting the employee retention tax credit. We talked about your experience selling tribal tax credits, this gimmick. Now let's talk about your other tax experience. Since 2023, you've been paid as a referral agent for employee retention tax credit promoters. You stated on a YouTube video that everybody qualifies for the employee retention tax credit, and you urged listeners to ignore CPAs who said they didn't qualify. Do you really think everybody qualifies?
If you listen to that video, I hate to correct you, but I didn't say everyone qualifies. I said virtually everyone qualifies, meaning that most people, virtually is in there. I listened to it the other day to make sure.
So basically, overwhelmingly everybody qualifies. You want to quibble about it? I think this is wrong, and that's what I'm troubled by.
You voted for it. I voted for it. We did it.
I voted for it when we all, during the heart of the COVID period, were trying to take employers and employees and get them some help. This problem, which we learned about from the commissioner, took place after COVID receded, and that's why we're so troubled by the fraud. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Bennett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Congressman Long, for being here. Are you, you're going to be the most important tax person in this administration, and I was curious about whether you were aware that yesterday the 30-year bond actually touched 5% interest rate.
Yes.
And why do you think that was?
I didn't follow it, but I heard about it, yeah.
Do you think it might have had to do with the fact that Moody's stripped the United States of our AAA rating last Friday?
I'm not aware. I know.
Are you worried? Are you worried, Congressman Long, that Moody's stripped the United
Yeah,
States
sure,
of our
I was aware of that, yeah.
Why are you not? Are you just aware of it? Are you worried about that?
When I got into Congress in 2011, our national debt was $14 trillion. I voted against every spending I could. Now it's 37. I think that the spending that people do here in Congress has a lot to do with why people are very concerned about our rating.
I would agree with that, because I think 1.1 out of $7 that we spend is now on interest. Would you agree that that's true?
Yes.
And that we're spending more now as a country on interest than we are on defense. That's before the yesterday's Sell America trade, as it was called, that lifted bond rate interest rates to 5%. Would you agree? That's tied to our deficit. You just mentioned it. You just mentioned how much it's increased. It's at $29 trillion today. How much more is that than when Donald Trump enacted his tax cuts in 2017?
2017, I don't have any recollection.
That's twice. Would it surprise you to know that it's twice as much as it was when he enacted his tax cuts in 2017? That our deficit is now twice as much as it was, probably 3 times it was when you joined the Congress to begin with?
I don't have any independent recollection of that, so I'm sure if you've got the figures, I'll go with your judgment.
Okay, well, that is, Congressman Long, what the facts tell us, and for the reasons that we were just talking about, our interest expense is only going up and up and up. Would you agree that as it goes up, that makes our deficit even worse than it already is?
As what goes up, I'm sorry?
The interest rates that we have to pay because this country is being downgraded because of the fiscal irresponsibility, you said, of Congress. I would say of an administration that is adding $3 trillion to our debt when we are not in a recession, because, among other things, they want to give tax cuts to the wealthiest people in America. What do you say to people is that fair to people in Missouri that
I fought
they
everything.
should have to?
Like I said, I fought all the spending for the 12 years I was here, and it fell on deaf ears. People don't want to cut you, don't want to cut me, cut the little guy behind the tree. And that's I mean, whether you're conservative or liberal, everybody says they want to do something about waste, fraud, and abuse, about spending.
What do we owe? You're the most important tax person in America now if you get this job. And you have that view of our deficits, which I know you've said that you do. What would you say to an administration that's now adding $3 trillion of debt, and where our credit rating has now lost its the last AAA rating that the United States of America had, that people in Missouri are counting on, people in Colorado are counting on, that we've now lost that AAA rating, and we're still going to spend like drunken sailors on your watch? What do you say to people at home about that?
Well, the same thing that I said for 12 years here in Congress. We have to get it under control. I'm not in the Congress anymore. I can't vote on
But do you see, is there any evidence is the most important? I mean, do you understand math? You're a smart person. They haven't passed the bill yet in the House that's going to add another $3 trillion on top of the $30 trillion that's already here. Why isn't your message to them, don't do it?
What? I can't hear.
Why isn't your message to them, don't do it, don't add any more debt to the people in Missouri?
I think we need to start paying down our debt. And I've said that for 12 years. And you're here, you're able to.
What are you
you're
going
able
to
do
say to
things.
the American people when you leave this administration and the debt is even is far worse today far worse when you're leaving than it is today?
We're going to have a lot of conversations with a lot of folks, with you and other people in Congress and the White House, and try and all work in the same direction.
I know I'm at an end, Mr. Chairman, but let me just say, I want the market to reflect that we are having this conversation 3 days after we lost the AAA rating of the debt of the United States, and a day after interest rate, the 30-year bond touched 5%. As a result of the fiscal irresponsibility of this administration. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Cortez Masto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to the ranking member. Congressman Long, a series of public reports last year unveiled a scheme by several companies to sell so-called tribal tax credits to investors. These credits are entirely fake. In fact, this committee received confirmation from the current IRS that confirmed that these tax credits not only do not exist, taxpayers who claim credits that don't exist are subject to penalties and possible examination, and furthermore, that promoters of these credits may be subject to civil or criminal penalties. The IRS goes on to say, remind all taxpayers to be aware of tax scams and encourages taxpayers to consult with their reputable tax advisor. In your follow-up to the public financial disclosure report that you provided to the committee, you identified the work that you have done. You have said you've received $65,000 from Capital Edge Strategies, and that $65,000 was related to referrals involving tribal tax credits sold by White River. In response to that question, is that true? You said all my work with Capital Edge was related to tribal tax credits. Is that correct?
Yes.
And so moving forward, as the commissioner of the IRS, knowing that it is illegal to refer tribal tax credits because it is a scam, how do you sit here now and say that you have no conflict of interest?
I had no involvement other than recommending they get their CPA, their CFO, if they were interested. And if they weren't interested, that was fine. Their professionals are the ones that looked at it to see the ramifications of it.
But you admitted that all
no,
your work with Capital Edge was related to tribal tax credits, and it is clear from the Treasury and the IRS that that's a scam. They don't exist. But yet you were referring those. In fact, you said in response to the question, how many tribal tax credit referrals did you work on for Capital Edge and White River? And you responded, less than 10 close friends and acquaintances to Capital Edge. So you did refer tribal tax credits to individuals, correct?
I referred them to Capital Edge Strategies, yes.
Okay, so knowing that they're illegal and the IRS has said they are illegal, how do you stand here before this committee and tell the chairman just a few minutes ago that you have no conflict of interest?
Because the Office of Government Ethics, which are career professionals that I've signed, controls all of that. And I did not have any perception whatsoever that these did not exist. And when I asked in our hearings the other day or our meetings with the staff, they said the IRS says they don't exist. And I said, who said that? We can't tell you. I mean, this needs to be investigated. Senator Wyden has the same interest.
So let me stop you right there. And so let me jump back to this. Because on April 14th, both Senator Wyden and I and this committee actually sent a letter to the acting commissioner of the IRS to investigate this. Are you aware of that letter?
No, I know that you all sent several letters to several people, but I'm not aware of that particular letter.
So let me make you aware of it. If you're not aware of it now, we'll submit it again for the record, that we've asked the IRS to investigate these tribal tax credits and the scam and the companies that were involved. And some of the companies allegedly that were involved were White River Energy Corporation, a company that you received compensation from. Isn't that correct?
No.
Yes or no?
I did not receive compensation from White River.
So
all my work was for Capital Edge. I've said several times. I met anyone in White River. I don't know anyone at White River. I simply referred to Capital Edge, where the credits came from or how that works.
On your financial disclosure statement, you disclosed $65,000 in income from referral fees from Capital Edge Strategies, correct?
I believe that's correct.
The financial disclosure stated that the source of the income was White River Energy Corporation, correct?
That was what OGE wanted to know.
That's what you filled out. That's what you filled out.
My understanding was that they...
So let me just say, I can only go with what you gave me. And this
Pardon?
is the I can only go with the information, the facts that you gave me. That's what you filled out. So my question to you is, if you don't think it's a conflict that you peddled in the scam as the IRS commissioner, then how can you sit here today and to say there's no conflict, knowing now that there's an investigation underway with the IRS and we're asking them to look at this scam and it may involve a company that you were affiliated with? How would you handle that as IRS commissioner?
I cannot have anything to do with any company or any people that I dealt with because the OGE form. And so I'm not pushing back on investigating.
I'm not asking about the form. I'm asking now. If you're nominated as the IRS commissioner, you know there's a potential investigation underway of a company that you were affiliated with. How would you handle that as IRS commissioner?
How will I what? I'm sorry.
How would you handle that as the IRS commissioner?
I would do whatever is legal and lawful and check with the legal staff and explain the situation to them and say that I worked for Capital Edge Strategies and they apparently had a arrangement with White River. And it was strange on that they wanted the information different than they wanted on the other things. So, but
Congressman Long, my time is up. My time is up, and I appreciate the indulgence of the chairman. I'm going to submit the rest of my questions for the record, and my concern is the fact that this company also contributed to one of your Senate-created PACs some money after you were nominated to the IRS. That's concerning. That is concerning that a company that is peddled in fraud, knows that there's a potential investigation from the IRS, is now providing you money, knowing that you are now being nominated to the IRS. I will submit my questions for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Long, we appreciate your being here today. One of the things that has been so frustrating to Tennesseans is when they call the IRS, they can't get answers, they get different answers, and the culture there has been that people don't even show up to work. They're working remote. And you spoke a little bit in your opening statement about culture. If you would talk about ending remote work and putting people back in the office and what you're going to do to make certain there is an explicit answer for our taxpayers.
Thank you for the question. And a lot of people think I'm still in Congress. So I get a lot of messages about issues and problems, and I got a message within the last 5 days. And it was from a gentleman, and he said, I've been on hold with the IRS for 2.5 hours. And he said, it's not about a disputed amount, it's about the first quarter trying to get answers. He said, after 2.5 hours, someone picked up the phone. And I had to get some paperwork, I had to go look up a W-2 or whatever, and after 12 minutes, the person on the phone said, I don't have time to wait for you. This is after he'd waited 2.5 hours. Call times, I mean, you call American Express, you call American Airlines. They say, would you like to be put in a queue? Let us know. We'll call you back in approximately 28 minutes. And I think that the IRS needs to run more like a business. We went over to Bucks County, Pennsylvania. Boyers is over, I'm not sure if it's in Bucks County because we never made it. We were trying to look at the limestone underground where everybody's papers, all the retirement papers are held, but there's a call center there in Bucks County, I believe it's in Bucks County. And we were allowed to sit and listen with a headset to the folks there answering people. Now, these are all former government employees calling about their, one gentleman, his mom had passed away the day before, and him and his sister were trying to figure out what needed to, happen or whatever. And the lady on the phone there that I was sitting by was so nice, so polite. The gentleman was so polite. I had some other people with me, and one of them was listening. 2 calls out of the 3 came in from Missouri. What I have found since in my time in D.C. is that over at Treasury, over at OPM, anywhere that I've been, the attitude of these federal employees is, I think they've taken my UFO class, upbeat, friendly, and open, because they're all speak to you. They don't know me from anybody, but they're friendly. I think we've got very good people working, but they need better systems, better equipment.
They need that guidance and leadership.
Pardon?
They need that guidance and leadership and that change of culture. Let me ask you about this. We've had lots of complaints about the direct file program, and it is something that was put in place without explicit congressional approval. And what I'd like to know is what you would do with that direct file program. There are a lot of us that think this should be shut down because there are plenty of free programs that are out there that people can file their tax. And so many people feel like this is overly intrusive into their personal information to use direct file.
It's probably one of the hottest topics at the IRS, I guess, except who's going to be the next commissioner. But I plan to, I've never been in the building. When we start having these meetings, that's one of the first things that I want to look at, because I know that they used it the previous tax season. And I want to say something about this tax season that just concluded, because people said when I got nominated in December, well, aren't you worried about this tax filing? And I said, no. I said, they have things running smoothly over there. And I want to congratulate everyone that was there in pulling off a very successful tax season. And I know they used it last year and this year, and the next tax season's right around the corner. I know that doesn't sound right on May the 20th, but it'll get here before you know it. So one of the first things I want to drill down on and have meetings on, I know there's people on both sides that have different opinions on direct file. I want to get to the bottom of it and see what is best for the hardworking employee partners that I will have at the IRS if I'm confirmed, and the taxpayers, what's best for those two groups, just like everything. And I want to develop a culture at the IRS that's not top down. I don't want it to be Billy Long's culture. Through these meetings, I want the people there to tell me what's going on in their life. I want to hear all about direct file.
My time's expired. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Senator Cassidy.
Hey, Mr. Long. How are you? You know, one thing I've been concerned about, which has really benefited my state, and I've seen that has benefited St. Louis when I visited St. Louis, is the Historic Preservation Easement Program. It will take an old building, which costs a lot to fix up, and you get a tax credit to do so, and you preserve a structure which, as I was once told, is both historic, iconic, and then catalytic for the neighborhood to upgrade. I saw an old post office in downtown St. Louis in which that was done. So I'm specifically interested in how the IRS will treat this, and particularly the property owners who protect these historic buildings using a historic preservation easement. On multiple occasions, the IRS Office of Chief Counsel has described their strategy as relates to historic preservation easements as guidance by litigation. Now, ideally, the IRS would accommodate the taxpayer up front so that the historic building owner can be confident that the tax deduction claimed under a congressionally authorized program is honored by the IRS. And by the way, Congress has repeatedly affirmed this program. Ronald Reagan has a great quote about this, it goes that far back. So do you agree that the IRS should reallocate enforcement resources towards front-end guidance and end the guidance by litigation campaign, which has been used against these easements?
Yes, I would most certainly. And earlier I'd mentioned that one of the things that I'm unusual to bring to the table, I'm only two, and I mentioned that I serve with 9 of you in Congress, including yourself, just on this one committee here. And being someone that has just left Congress 2.5 years ago, I want my people to have access, with your all's permission, to the Finance Committee, to the Ways and Means Committee, so that we know when these are written and how to carry them out. We don't have to guess for 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 15 months before they decide how to do it. So I agree with you, yes.
I appreciate that. And then, and going specifically to the historic tax credits, as I've said, they can be historic, catalytic, iconic and catalytic. And so under the previous administration, Commissioner Werfel requested additional national or statewide extension for completing grandfathered HTCs. So during the COVID pandemic, a lot of stuff got shut down. And there was a time limit as to when this could be executed. But COVID shut things down. Their response was because an extension had been granted for some projects early in the pandemic, no further relief could be provided. But it didn't address additional disasters which had occurred, which significantly impacted that. So I guess what I'm saying is, just because there was the pandemic requiring relief does not mean that if a hurricane hits, there's not another circumstance in which relief would again be required, reasonably required, not because I couldn't make my note, but rather because, wait a second, you blew out the place and all the workers have been moved to another place to like put roofs on people. I'm asking if you confirm if you would do anything to revisit this.
Anything what? I'm sorry.
Anything to revisit this kind of, oh wait, you've had a COVID era extension, so therefore you never again qualify no matter what other circumstances there are.
In my office in Rayburn, I had several pictures right in my little area where you walk in there where the receptionists sit, and of all pictures of presidents and whatever, the thing that got the most attention in my office was a little brown sign about this big square that in white letters, and it said, "Bring back common sense." And what you're talking about is common sense. So yes, I agree, and I think that we all need to work together and figure out common sense.
I like that answer. And then I get one more question in real quickly. If you go back to the Reagan era once more, there is headline after headline saying how IRS has missed their deadlines for IT upgrades. And yet under the federal government, there is a off-the-shelf modernization effort that you can, if there's something in the private sector that meets your need, you can employ that. Now, it seems as if most federal agencies want to write their own. They want to do their own coding as opposed to go out to somebody and say, will you come do it for us using your already done. So your approach to how you would upgrade the IT, which is, again, woefully in need of upgrading?
Well, I think that we have to go, there's a lot of big companies that deal with more people than the IRS does, and they seem to be able to pull off things seamlessly with all their IT. And I think that in sales, they say success leaves clues, and failure does too. I think we need to take the clues from private sector, and if we can get things from them, which I've had 1 million people, and I've said, I'm not doing anything with the IRS, I can't talk to you, call me back after confirmation if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed, and we can visit that. But I think that we need to look at what private sector's doing and run the government a little bit more that way.
Thank you very much.
I don't know if that answers you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hassan.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and Ranking Member Wyden, for this hearing. Welcome, Mr. Long. Just on that issue of IT modernization, you know, the IRS has a long-term IT modernization plan. There is some congressional funding available to help push it forward, and I hope you will look at that plan, because I think we need to implement it much more rapidly than they are, but there is a plan in place, and I just wanted to make you aware of that. Mr. Long, if you're directed by the President to take an action that would violate the law, would you follow the President's directive or follow the law?
I didn't catch the first of it, but follow the law, definitely.
Thank you for being clear on that. I also want to understand how you would improve taxpayer service for granted staters if you are confirmed to lead the IRS. My constituents continue to face many unacceptable issues in dealing with the IRS, including significant delays in receiving their refunds and having their tax returns processed. If confirmed, how will you speed up delivery of tax refunds?
I mentioned in my opening that I think in your office too, I saw a lot of it, and thank you because a lot of you took time to visit with me in your office, but I think that we have to listen to the people in these regional offices. Charles Rossetti, who I kind of want to pattern myself after, was big on getting out to these offices. Every time I'm in D.C., every day I'm in D.C., I'm going to be there 90 minutes early to listen to the people and decide how we can. The only two people, I don't care about, Billy Long is not important today. Billy Long's not in this equation. What I care about is the taxpayer partners that I will have if I'm confirmed at the IRS and the taxpayers. And I mentioned that I don't want either one of those to be afraid of the other one to come in and to work with.
I understand that, but look, I asked you a very specific question.
I'm sorry, I didn't
about
pick
how
it up
you
then.
will speed up delivery of tax funds, and there weren't any specifics in your answer. While Granite Staters have struggled with delays receiving their refunds, the administration has cut the number of employees in the New Hampshire office of the Taxpayer Advocate Service, which helps taxpayers who are struggling with the IRS. This has significantly increased wait times for tax assistance. So since the administration has come in, since the administration has cut that number of critical employees who help taxpayers navigate the IRS, in New Hampshire, the wait times are worse. So if you're confirmed, will you commit to reversing the cuts to the New Hampshire office of the Taxpayer Advocate Service, cuts which have increased wait times for Granite Staters who need assistance?
I'm loyal to a fault, and I'm going to be loyal to the taxpayer partners and to the employee partners and to the taxpayers. So if it's within my power, I'm going to advocate for those people, just like if it's my family.
Right, but some of these people have already been cut, they've been let go, and it has meant that the customer service at the IRS in New Hampshire is worse today than it was several months ago.
I don't think having worse customer service is acceptable. I'm
No,
sorry.
it's not, and it takes people to provide customer service. And so, especially nuanced customer service, we spend a lot of time in my office. We have a constituent service unit, and we spend a lot of time on a variety of issues, and I can tell you that we are getting more and more calls from taxpayers who can't get an answer from the IRS, can't get somebody on the phone in the IRS, and are seeing significant delays in getting their refunds. Now, I want to turn to another question. I'd like to follow up on my colleagues' questions related to how this year you used new funds donated to your defunct Senate campaign to repay yourself for a personal loan. Around the time of your nomination to this position, you took in $165,000 in donations to your 2022 campaign fund, and then used these funds to pay yourself $130,000 to retire the remaining balance of a loan that you had made to your campaign. Meanwhile, you only had received about $36,000 in donations in the prior 2 years. These donations, which benefited your personal finances, seem to have been motivated by your nomination to lead the Internal Revenue Service. Did you at any time make your donors aware of your plans to use their donations to pay back a personal loan that you made to your campaign? Or do you have any knowledge that your donors were aware that you intended to use their donations to repay a personal loan?
Everything I think you know exactly how campaign debt is handled, and everything that I did was compliant with the Federal
But that, of course, is not what I'm asking you, sir. This is a real question about whether people made donations to your personal financial benefit after you became the nominee because they were hoping that they'd have more influence with you as that leader of IRS. And that's what's at issue here. That goes to the questions that Senator Cortez Masto was asking about your conflicts of interest, and the ranking member were as well.
Everything that I signed with OGE, with the career employees over there, dictates whether I can have anything to do with anyone like that. So
I appreciate that, but I wish I were getting a more direct answer, and I hope very much you'll restore those positions in New Hampshire. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Grassley.
Yeah. My first question, I hope you don't take too long to answer because the second question is the main one on my mind. But since we always hear from the previous administration emphasis on enforcement. While I agree enforcement of our tax laws is necessary, in my view, the emphasis should be on improving customer service to put the taxpayer first, because giving good information is one way of helping the taxpayers to abide by the law. Most taxpayers want to do that and would gladly do so if they could get their phone calls answered and questions addressed. If confirmed, what is the balance you hope to strike between enforcement and customer service? And by the way, I want to.
I want. A hard time hearing you. That last part of the question there. Is your mic on, or can you just pull up both?
She wants to get your mic closer to you.
Oh, you didn't hear my question. I'm sorry.
I listened.
Okay.
But I don't think
The last part of it.
Listen. Yes. If confirmed, what is the balance you hope to strike between enforcement and customer service? And I'm sorry I didn't have my mic on.
Yeah, okay. I was sort of say that, I wasn't sure if that's the case or not. But everything that we do has to be fair to both sides, and we have to handle the taxpayers, whether they're paying in or whether it's a compliance issue, in exactly the same manner according to the code, what the laws dictate that we do.
Okay. A program that I've championed, I think going way back to the early 2000s, IRS whistleblower program to incentivize those with knowledge of high-dollar tax evasion to alert the IRS, and this deals mostly with corporations. To date, this program has brought in over $6 billion to the Treasury and could raise billions more if used by the IRS to its fullest extent. Should you be confirmed, can I count on you to be supportive of the whistleblower program and work to ensure it's used to its full potential? And let me explain some of the problem. We got people that sometimes don't get any word from the IRS for years about what's being done on what they suggested, that tax money wasn't being paid by a particular corporation. And it seems to me, if you're interested in enforcement, these whistleblowers bring you information that the IRS would never have, and you ought to follow up on it and collect the money. But we seem to get inaction in some cases from the IRS.
I don't think that there's a lot of daylight between Charles Grassley and Billy Long on that issue, and you were one of the very first senators that allowed me to come into your office and visit, and we had a robust discussion on whistleblowers, and I'm right there with you, Senator.
Well, thank you. That's good to hear. In recent years, there have been multiple instances of taxpayer information being improperly disclosed or leaked from the IRS. The most prominent example involved the IRS contractor releasing thousands of individual tax returns to liberal publication ProPublica. I guess he's in prison now as a result of that. But in your view, how important is it for the IRS to maintain the confidentiality of private taxpayer information?
I think it's utmost, the utmost. And I don't know if it's my place. I'm not in Congress. I'm sure it's not my place. But I think that some of the I know whenever Ways and Means was having a thing, they brought up the thing of the penalties involved and whether they should be strengthened. But for what some of these cases have leaked of people's personal information, and why they do that, who knows, but there should be as stringent penalties and as long-term sentences as you could possibly get, I would think. But the law is the law, and if they get the maximum, and it's not very much, that's what you're dealing with today.
You mentioned in your written testimony, technology at the IRS is dangerously out of date and needs to be modernized. Updating IRS information technology has been a priority for every commissioner for decades. Unfortunately, such efforts have been plagued with cost overruns and have under-delivered in terms of performance. What steps can you take as commissioner to ensure that this history doesn't repeat itself and we don't waste a lot of taxpayers' money trying to upgrade everything?
I think that I mentioned earlier that we need to use a lot of things that other businesses are using to do things more effectively than the IRS.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Good to see you, Congressman. I enjoyed our office visit. I've enjoyed serving with you and our capacity as members of Congress. I know that you're going to bring the same seriousness of purpose and professionalism to this post that you did in serving the people of Missouri's 7th Congressional District. I'd like to focus on part of your written testimony that highlights your commitment to implementing a plan aimed at enhancing the IRS's service provision. It's widely recognized that the IRS has longstanding challenges with outmoded technology, limited IT modernization, and they're generally behind the curve, and you've spoken to this, compared to many other federal agencies and certainly many other private enterprises in this 21st tech-heavy century. As tax administration grows increasingly complex and digital transformation continues, you and I would expect, would agree the IRS needs to keep up. This committee has been working on a bipartisan tax administration package that includes several common sense reforms to the IRS and tax filing process. My constituents, America's taxpayers, can't wait. I mean, it's out of hand. IRS is several years behind in reviewing tax returns and frequently gets things right, offers improper advice to many of us. One of my contributions to this overall effort is a Barcode Efficiency Act, trying to make sure that the IRS, like so many other entities around the country, can scan tax returns in this case, and then this will facilitate more filing on paper so that the IRS can easily convert that information into digital formats and harmonize and streamline the customer experience. So listen, we in Congress have not passed a broader IRS reform package since the Taxpayer First Act of 2019. I hope that changes. I think it will. But you have an opportunity as I see it, Mr. Long. We have not had an IRS commissioner put pen to paper on a modernization plan in over 6 years. So with that in mind, if confirmed, will you commit to developing a comprehensive IRS modernization plan that prioritizes customer service, identifies critical technology infrastructure needs, and ensures greater transparency in audit practices? Yes or no?
Yes.
Excellent. You'll commit it
Yes.
to paper so we can all review it, debate it,
Yes, sir.
and hold you accountable.
Yes. I want to be held accountable on all of this.
That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thank you, Mr. Long. I look forward to working with you on that. I know other members of the committee will as well. Now, while modernization will go a long way towards improving IRS efficiency, reducing error rates, it's not going to be enough. We still require human interaction with people from time to time to deal with the more nuanced issues we encounter. Sometimes it's nice to talk with a human being rather than go to the drop-down menu of the drop-down menu and you're on the wrong website and this and that. And there are limitations to even today's technology. So as you know from your time back in Congress, we have casework teams that do their best to help people navigate the puzzle palace that is our federal government. And they do a really good job in my office. But if confirmed, do you commit to working with my office and every other congressional office to ensure that our constituents' tax-related matters are addressed and resolved in a timely manner? Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course, the Taxpayer Advocate Service has also been emphasized by some of my colleagues for the key role it plays. I would agree in ensuring that taxpayers receive fair treatment from the IRS. Taxpayer Advocate Service case advocates are often those who engage most with my office to help us help our constituents. And they provide invaluable service on behalf of Hoosiers across the state. How do you envision the relationship between the IRS and Taxpayer Advocate Service under your leadership, and how, if at all, could this relationship, as you step into this role, be improved to strengthen the important mission of the Taxpayer Advocate Service?
I have not spoken to the taxpayer advocate, but through, like I mentioned earlier, a lot of people think I'm still in Congress. I constantly I had a fellow the other day sent me a picture of his brother's leg who was having trouble with the VA, and he'd lost it in Afghanistan and was having fits with them. So I put him in contact with the right people. On anything tax, I say I'm not involved, I'm not the IRS, but here, and I will chat GPT, Indiana Taxpayer Assistance Service officers. They're in every state, and usually there's more than one depending on your population. And I've had good reports back from people that say, thank you for, so I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that that's a very efficient, effective way for taxpayers to get served. Like I said, I'm not important today. What's important is that I want to help my employee partners. I want people at the SBA a year from now to say, I want to go to work over there at the IRS. I hear Billy Long runs such a good shop. He gets in 90 minutes early every day, lets anybody in the building come in and talk to him. He's built a great culture, not his culture, but a great culture with them and the taxpayers themselves. And I don't want them to be intimidated. A lot of times today, the taxpayers are very intimidated. They get a certified letter on their desk from the IRS, and they open it up. Sometimes it's accurate information, sometimes it's not. So the taxpayer advocate, to me, I didn't know where else to turn them to, but that's what I've been doing, and the results and what people have told me, they're pretty happy with it.
Thank you, sir. Chairman?
Senator Langford.
Chairman, thank you. Bill, it's good to see you again. I have the privilege of knowing you for a long time because we served together in the House of Representatives. So while some folks around this dais are just getting a chance to know you, I've seen your work ethic. I know how hard you work on things because I've had the opportunity to be able to see it firsthand. So I appreciate you stepping up on this. There is a certain sense that you get when you get a letter from the IRS that comes to your house, but there's also a certain sense that you get when the President of the United States says, I want you to be the commissioner of the IRS, because it is a very, very difficult task to be able to manage. No one likes paying taxes on everything or likes doing all the math and paying a CPA, doing all those details, but trying to be able to make sure that the law is strictly enforced, that that's actually carried out, and to be able to manage this in the most efficient way possible is absolutely essential for our nation. The death and taxes thing is still true no matter where you are. Those two things are certain. We do have to be able to run a government. That means we do have to do good collection. And we do have to be able to do it the right way. So I appreciate you stepping up to do this.
When he said, well, if I would consider being the 51st commissioner of the IRS, I assumed he'd called 50 other people that had turned it down.
Yeah, rather than 51st total in the country's history. So let me run a couple things past you. We're going to do a tax bill here in the next couple of months to be able to get that done, as we did in 2017. There'll be a lot of work that the IRS has to do to be able to put guidance documents out, to be able to give clear instructions of what that means. They'll have to promulgate a lot of regulations with that. The Trump administration put in place an oversight of the Office of Information Regulatory Affairs, called OIRA, to be able to look at the process when the IRS did regulations. The Biden administration swept that away and said, we're not going to have oversight for IRS. We're going to do what we're going to do, and we're going to do it the way we want to do it. This administration's put that oversight back into place again. How do you anticipate, when regulations are being created in the oversight process, to be able to make sure that it's done on a timely basis, because taxpayers need to get an answer for that, but also there's good oversight in place for the regulations made?
I think that it provides cost-benefit analysis and consistency, and I'm all for it, I guess is what I'd say.
Yeah, all right, that's helpful, because again, it helps us save taxpayer money as well, to make sure there's less litigation, to be able to have somebody over your shoulder looking at it going, yep, all the boxes were checked, this follows the Administrative Procedures Act, this is done correctly. So it gets answers out faster, and that actually protects us long-term from litigation on it, so that's helpful. Senator Young had mentioned something about casework. I just want to be able to put an exclamation point on that as well. Our caseworkers in state are experiencing more delays on getting an answer back. That in the past has been a crucial lifeline. If we go back several years ago, it was a very long time to be able to get an answer. And so all of our offices were flooded with questions. That's gotten progressively better, and now it's not as good as it was, let's say, 6 months ago. So I think part of the request is let's make sure that casework side, you're not in that position, you're not leading that at this point, but that will be important no matter who you are, Republican or Democrat, to be able to make sure that our caseworkers are able to call into somebody with the IRS and get an answer, and to be able to make sure that they actually get that response to that. So just want to be able to put an exclamation point on that. During the Biden administration, the IRS started putting out something called soft letters. This was not an audit. It was just a letter to bring information to people, but no one really knew what to be able to do with this. It falls somewhere in between all the different definitions of a letter you're getting from the IRS. We had lots of constituents say, what is this? What do I do with this? Is this an official audit? Is it not an official audit? Do I turn this in? Do I need to contact an attorney? Do I need to give a CBA? What do I need to do with this on this? What I'd like to know is your plan on interacting with constituents in my state and other states on trying to get official communication between IRS and to be able to make sure things are clear, that there's not this soft letter sense of we're doing an audit, but we're really not doing an audit. Because if you're just doing a soft letter, you don't get all the protections that you get when you get an audit. So no one knows where they really fall in this.
What was your experience when you got these and you reached out to the IRS? I mean, could you get answers rapidly or not, or?
What we were getting was we're just requesting information, but it seemed to be a new way to go get it, and no one really knew what their legal protections are. How do I respond to this? How do I not respond to this? If I respond to this, does now an audit begin? What happens with this?
I think by developing the culture that I want to develop, and it's not my culture, but I want to develop a culture over the next 90 days at the Internal Revenue Service with these 90, like I said, I'm going to get in about 90 minutes before the building opens every day and let anyone get on my calendar for 10 minutes in the building. I don't care what your position is, if you're the highest ranking person there, or if you've been there 15 minutes, and get your opinion on what's going on. I think things like this, you've got my cell number, everybody on the committee will have my cell number. Don't call me unless you want me to try and help you. Yeah. We will do everything we can to be responsive. I'd like to pattern some of the IRS after Congressman Mark Green's office. A lot of people, you call their office and they say, I'm leaving in 2 weeks for a trip and my kid doesn't have their passport and we need to get a passport. Okay, well, I'll have somebody get back with you that can help you with that. Mark Green's office, you call him and you got a passport issue. Okay, just a minute, let me get out of that screen that I'm in and I'll help you. And they help you instantaneously. Yeah. I got a lot of questions. I don't have all the answers, but I want to develop the answers. And I know Senator Wyden thinks that I'm a gregarious guy and somehow that's bad, I guess, but I truly, truly like people and I want to work with people and I want, we're all in this together. Nobody benefits. I'm not in politics anymore. I'm hoping to be the IRS commissioner if I'm fortunate enough to be confirmed by this committee and off the House floor. So I know people have apprehension. Anytime a Democrat puts up a commissioner, then the other side wants to say, oh, they're a terrible person. Anytime a Republican puts up and say, oh, they're terrible. And I would have liked to have spent the last 5.5 months having people call me and come into their office and talk about issues instead of trying to do whatever to prove that I'm everything but a decent human being. And that's wrong about this town. That's wrong about how things operate. When Charles Rossetti sat here, I think it was 100% out of the committee. I think he got 100% of the votes, and I think on the floor he got 92-0, if I'm not mistaken. But those days are long gone. But he turned the agency around. He had very little, he didn't have any tax experience, but he cared about people. He cared about going out and meeting these different offices. When he'd go out to an office and he'd walk in that day at these district offices, regional offices, and they'd be going out for an audit that day, he'd say, I want to go out on the audit. They'd say, sir, you can't go out on the audit. You're the IRS commissioner.
Thank you.
Said, I can go out on the audit because I am the IRS commissioner. Yep. And it's a lot of stinking thinking has gone on for a long time, and morale's at a low spot over there. And we only got up to go. I mean, let an outsider with an A personality, the way the last 50,
We need to go on to Senator Warren.
I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the IRS collects nearly all federal revenue, and that means that behind every road we build, every Social Security check that we pay is the IRS, making sure that everyone pays what the law says they owe. No politics. But Donald Trump has a different idea. He wants to use the IRS to punish his enemies. On May 2nd, Trump said, quote, "We are going to be taking away Harvard's tax-exempt status." Harvard wouldn't cave in to other demands Trump made, so Trump said he would hurt them using the IRS. Now, this is about more than Harvard. It is a threat to anyone who might displease the president, including the people or organizations that can't afford to have expensive legal battle if Trump sets the IRS on them. So, Mr. Long, when you and I met, I asked you whether it was illegal for the president to tell the IRS to revoke a taxpayer's nonprofit status. And you said in our meeting that you weren't sure, but you would take a look and consult with lawyers. I sent you the statute. You've had 3 weeks to talk to the lawyers about it. So let's jump in. Mr. Long, is it illegal for the president to direct the IRS to revoke a taxpayer's nonprofit status?
In the first place, he wouldn't do that. He's not going to come to me and say that.
That's not my question, Mr. Long. Please don't start down this.
Are we on section 7212 or 7217?
I'm at 26 U.S.C. 7217. Do I need to read it to you?
Prohibits any member of the executive branch to request the IRS to conduct or terminate an audit on a taxpayer.
All righty. So is it illegal?
I'm going to follow the law, and if that's the law, yes.
Okay, but I want you, that is the law.
Yeah.
So I just want to be clear. Is it illegal for the President of the United States to instruct the IRS to remove a taxpayer's nonprofit status?
Prohibits any member of the executive branch to request the IRS to conduct or terminate an audit of the taxpayer.
Right. Is that a yes?
I'd have to go to the lawyers at the IRS to tell me.
No, come on. You just read it.
I know, but I don't see the instance that you're speaking about in there. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see.
Look, it says it shall be unlawful for any applicable person, which in this case includes the president, to request directly or indirectly any officer or employee of the Internal Revenue Service to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of any particular taxpayer. Is it illegal for the president to instruct the IRS to remove nonprofit status from a taxpayer?
I'm not going to have the answer that you need, and I apologize, but like I said.
Why are you not having the answer? You've had 3 weeks to consult with lawyers. The statute is about as clear as plain English.
Well, if I say I'm going to follow the law, why would you need to ask me the question?
Well, because I want to make sure that you understand what the law says. If you think follow the law means you just get to make it up on the spot, then, Bud, you don't get to be the IRS commissioner.
I said I would.
The point here is to follow the law as it is written, and I'm asking what I think is a pretty simple question. Can the President of the United States legally tell the IRS to change someone's nonprofit status?
I'm not able to answer.
You can't read these words and tell what those words say?
I can read the statute, and I did.
All right, then tell me what they mean. What does it mean to say that a person, an applicable person here, that's the president, right?
Yes.
All right. Cannot directly or indirectly, right, tell any officer or employee, that would be you, of the Internal Revenue Service to conduct or terminate an audit or other investigation of any particular taxpayer. What part do you not understand here?
It seems to be not a nonprofit, I don't see exactly what it refers to.
Any taxpayer to start an investigation of any taxpayer.
If it's illegal, I'm not going to allow it to happen in my IRS.
Is it illegal? That's the
Me
question.
and you will
I
be
wanna make
friends
sure you
then.
can
I
read
want to be
the
your friend
statute.
anyway, but we will be on the same page. I'm going to follow the law, and if that's point blank
What do
the
you
law.
understand the law to be saying about the president telling the IRS in his dealings with any particular taxpayer? What do you understand this law to be saying?
I think it sounds like it's saying what you're saying, but I've got a little bit of the section here, and I looked at it. I talked to an attorney that used to be at the IRS and now going to maybe be back at the IRS, and I'm sorry if I don't have the answer.
What, you mean the lawyers told you they couldn't understand this?
The what?
The lawyers told you they couldn't understand this?
I didn't say that.
Well, then tell me, what part do you not understand? It says no person, and you've said that's the president, that includes the president, cannot instruct any officer, that would be you, of the IRS to conduct or to terminate an audit or other investigation for any particular taxpayer.
I don't intend to let anybody direct me to start audit for political reasons or any other type of reason.
Does that include the President of the United States?
That's anyone.
Can you say
Anyone.
yes, that the President of the United States cannot tell the IRS what to do?
I can tell them they're not going to tell me what to do. I can't speak for if there's other agents at the IRS that you're talking about, but I'm telling you what I don't want to have happen in my IRS.
You know, Mr. Long, you'd have a lot more credibility if you just say yes. It's clear that the statute makes it illegal for the president to direct the IRS vis-a-vis any particular taxpayer. And the fact that you want to sit there and dance around about this tells me that you shouldn't be within 1,000 miles of the directorship of the IRS. I apologize.
Senator Barrasso.
Well, thanks so much, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations on this nomination. I tell you about weaponizing the IRS. I think we saw that the last 4 years by the Biden administration against different groups and church groups, parents, all sorts of things. The IRS was weaponized. And I'm just going to ask you about restoring the credibility of the IRS, which I thought lost a lot of credibility during the last 4 years under Joe Biden and the Democrat control. So I think very few agencies in Washington are as present in the lives of working families as the IRS is. When you came to visit with me, I told you my concerns and the concerns of the people of Wyoming, that the IRS is the most powerful, but yet what we've seen in the past, the least accountable of the agencies of the government. So under the Biden administration, the president's really shifted from helping people understand our taxes to presuming everybody was breaking the law, that we were all a bunch of crooks. They wanted to add, 87,000 IRS agents to shake down small businesses because even the Congressional Budget Office said, yeah, if you add all these more IRS agents, then they're going to bring in that much more money because they're going to be out there auditing small businesses and going after families. And in Wyoming, I regularly hear from folks, they're just concerned about any dealings they have with the IRS. And if they don't hear from them, that's better, because these are honest taxpayers. They want to pay what they owe. They want to make sure that when they have a question, they can get an answer. And I think too often, if they call the IRS repeatedly, they're unable to get anybody to answer the phone or helping them comply or saying, yeah, this is a number you can rely on and you pay this and it's fair. So, the IRS's audit notices don't seem to be delayed, but their answers seem to be delayed. But, this hiring of thousands of new agents to investigate taxpayers really, I think, set the IRS even further away from the American people in terms of an agency that they trust. So, if confirmed, could you just talk a little bit about how you hope to restore the credibility of the IRS with the American people?
And thank you for the question, and thank you for the time in your office. You know that my wife and her family have deep ties. That's where she was raised, out there in Wyoming. But I think that my three most important things at the IRS are fairness, fairness, and fairness. I think you have to be fair to the taxpayers, but you also have to have your employee partners that are going to work with them and not be intimidated by one or the other. And when you talk about calling the IRS and getting information, I mentioned earlier when I did talk radio for 6 years, there wasn't a week that went by that I didn't say you could call the IRS 5 days a week with the same question to get 6 different answers. And unfortunately, that happens still today. I don't know how to prepare for something like this. I mean, my thought was go back and watch old commissioner hearings, for Senate approval of people that have been nominated to be commissioner of the IRS, because I thought that it was important to and it's the same thing over and over and over for all these years, whether it's technology, whether it's taxpayer fairness, heavy-handed investigations of people. And let's bring back common sense, as I told, I think it was Senator Young a while ago, that let's bring back common sense to the IRS and stay in constant communication with the senator's office, with the Congress's office. And when I just left Congress 2.5 years ago, I want people in my office to be able to sit in with you all when you're developing these laws. So once it's done, you don't have to spend 6 or 10, 12 months deciding what it meant, because that's what a lot of these problems are today that we've been discussing, or something goes over to the IRS and it takes them forever to put out guidance on it. And it's kind of like the king's horsemen roll into town and they jump off the horse and they roll out the scroll, and this is this week's edicts. And they roll it back up and go out of town, come back 3 weeks later and roll out another scroll with this week's edict that they're deciding over there. So I think communication is number one. And I've always been a pretty good communicator. And I want to have a very open door policy. And we were talking about Charles Rossetti earlier, and he said the first thing he did at the IRS, he went down there and all the doors were solid. You couldn't see anybody's in their office. He said, go get me a stopper, rubber stopper. And he propped his door open from that day on so that people could have accessibility to him and get in. And I'm going to improve on Charles' system. I'm going to have anybody that wants to get on my schedule every morning for 90 minutes before the place opens to hear their concerns, to hear how we can treat taxpayers better and not be heavy-handed. We got to collect, what do we collect, 96% of the income in this country through the IRS, so it's a pretty important agency. And I know that, the position I am, it's, not what everybody aspires to be, but through my years on the radio and everything, all the issues that I knew people had with the IRS, and when I was at Congress for 12 years, that was a large part of our constituent services.
Let me have one last question, and it's on protecting taxpayer data. And people are very concerned about their own private information. Last answer, you said you'd worked on the word intimidation. People feel intimidated, and especially their worry is that their data may get out there, information that they don't want shared with anybody, and it's because of some hacking or something has in the IRS. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think that, it's vitally important. 6103 is the longest section in the IRS code, and I think we have to bend over backwards to do everything we can possibly do to protect that data.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Long, so there are strong bipartisan majorities in Congress have passed laws to make it illegal for political officials to interfere in tax administration. Senator Warren asked you a pretty easy question, which was, is the president prohibited by law from interfering with the tax collecting work of the IRS? And it was difficult for you to say that was clearly the case. So let me just take this a little bit further here. As commissioner of the IRS, what would be your legal obligation if, for example, the president or vice president or some member of their staff were to tell you, either directly or indirectly, to investigate a foundation for the purposes of revoking their tax-exempt status? What would be your legal obligation if they did direct you?
I think that it would be to report to the IG.
So I'm glad to hear you say that. Any officer or employee of the Internal Revenue Service who's received any request prohibited by this should report that. And would you do that if that were to be the case?
I would follow the law, and if that's what the law is, I just said I'd turn it over to the IG, yes.
So you would follow through and you would report that?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
well,
favoritism has gone on. If you go back and look at the short history, Republican, Democrat presidents over a very long period have played politics with the IRS, and it's not going to happen on my watch. It can't happen. I don't want it to happen. It's not right with anybody.
And here we have a president who has specifically said when he doesn't like the grant-making activities of foundations, for example, that he questions whether their tax-exempt status should be revoked. So I suspect, Mr. Long, if you become commissioner, this is going to be on your plate on the very first day. And it's important for me to understand that you're going to follow through and that you will follow the law here. And I just have to raise that a while ago, you did push for an investigation into into a nonprofit. This was in the situation of the Missouri ballot referendum that you disagreed with. You pushed for an investigation into this nonprofit, which looks to me like political interference in tax processes, which gives me a lot of concern. Now, I want to follow up, if I may, on this question of the tribal tax credits. You know, there is a long history of unscrupulous promoters trying to make a buck by taking advantage of people who are just looking to find a little extra money, boost their retirement, or have a little more money for the good things in life. And I know you're familiar with this. My colleagues have asked you about this before, these tribal tax credits. I just want to understand clearly. Can you say clearly that these tribal tax credits were real or were they fake?
I had no indication that they were anything but real, and like I said, the onus was put on their professional people to look at these. I didn't. It was only a few friends that I referred them to, and I said, "You need to get on it if you're interested. If you're not interested, fine." I didn't go out, anyway. And I'd say get your CPA, your CFO, lawyer, whoever you want on the and look at them and see the certificates that are coming over Treasury and see if they are.
But today, knowing what you know.
I tried to find out who at the IRS from the staff the other day said that, and they just like, oh, we can't tell you. And I'm like,
well, but the IRS has said clearly that these tax credits do not exist. So could you say today that, yeah, that was
I haven't heard that from anyone with the IRS directly, and when I'm trying to find out who, there's a lot of people that work at the IRS.
Well, if I were to provide this to you, would you then say, boy, this was a big mistake. We shouldn't have been marketing these tax credits. I mean, this is information that we've gotten from the committee, from the IRS.
It was
Are you disputing that?
It was even before the article came out. Back in, December, a few weeks after I got nominated. I haven't,
So if you
I wanted to see how it came out in the wash and see what happened and see what the investigation. Well, I didn't mention them to one person after that, trying to say, hey, you ought to, because at that point,
So the IRS has said that these tax credits do not exist.
Who at the IRS?
They have said this, and if you were to become the commissioner of the IRS, then would you take action on this? I mean, you have kind of a blatant conflict of interest here, having received payment for marketing these. Would you pursue this as commissioner?
I plan to do everything that the career professionals at OGE that I signed with them would permit. I mean, anybody that has tried to do anything illegal or whatever needs to be investigated, but with my ethics agreement, I'm not sure what my involvement could be or would be, but it will be whatever it can be. I don't want that going on. I don't want anything. I mean, who would come up? This was a publicly traded company that had it on their SEC that they had these credits. So, I mean, I can have somebody at the IRS say, here, I'm the guy at the IRS, not the IRS, but the Treasury that comes out and says that. Are you saying, well, I guess you said the IRS said that, right?
So that's a lot of words. And I think the thing that I'm concerned about is that you appear to have a conflict of interest here. You've received payment for marketing these tax credits, which the IRS itself says do not exist. I think this is a big problem. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
The OGE, whatever that they think is proper in that instance, I will do. I'm not trying to.
Senator Tillis.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Long, thank you for being here. Congratulations on your nomination. A question that I have relates to the employee retention tax credit. You and I talked about a little bit about this in the office. Thank you for the amount of time you spent in there. I intend to support your confirmation. I hate the employee retention tax credit because it's been abused. It's been abused so much that we have come up with this construct of a fake pay-for on tax bills where the recovery of fraudulent claims will be used to offset future tax policy. The problem with that is that we passed this bill when we thought that this economy was going to go into the tank because of COVID. So we passed this bill and a number of other bills, which is raise spending levels that we're trying to get under control now, to actually try to help people that were really struggling. But what we found Now, as some people didn't need it, some people are applying for it way after the fact, and it makes no sense to me. So I know there's already in the House bill, I think there's a $3.5 billion recovery of fraudulent claims as a pay-for future tax policy. I actually believe that we should end it. So my question for you, do you think we should end the employee retention tax credit? And whatever savings or fraudulent applications we identify, should they go back to the Treasury where they came?
According to my understanding, and as you know, we voted on it under Trump and then redid it under Biden with several amendments, but the Taxpayer Advocate Service that we had a discussion on earlier said this was the #1 problem, and to my way, unless you know something about that I don't know, it ended April 15th of this year.
Well,
so
what we're talking about doing is going back to January of 24 and saying those claims we're not going to fill those claims. So we're talking about going back retroactively. Some have been filled by now. We're talking, I've got to work through the fairness of clawing some of that back, but I've been trying to kill this turkey for 2 or 3 years now, and I believe that we need to stick a fork in it. And I believe that if money has not gone out the door, then it need not go out the door. I'm just, for the life of me, trying to figure out how in the hell could somebody, if the whole idea of the COVID relief policy was fiscal conservatives like me were saying, look, I'm not going to question things when we're in the middle of a global pandemic and on the brink of a global fiscal crisis. So that's when you kind of have to set the perfect aside and try to do what we can to stabilize it. And there's no question that Congress did that. But this just looks to me like I want to stick a fork in it. I want to end it. It looks like the House bill has the claims back to 2024 that haven't been played out or potentially claw them back. Do you have any concerns with that proposed policy out of the House?
I have concerns about being fair, and it depends on if what we voted on in Congress, if people followed the letter of the law, dotted the I's, crossed the T's, and of course, you know, they suspended paying anybody September 14th of 2023, and so people that were, you know, in line before that or already had their paperwork in, some of those people I know still haven't.
Well, I want to get to one other question. I can't tell you how many people I talked to in North Carolina who were suffering, businesses, who said, you know what, I'm just not going to, I think I can make do, but I'm not going to file for the employee retention tax credit because I think I can get it done. I think there were some other people going, hell, there's a pot of money out here and I'm qualified for it. So even though I may not need it, I'm going to try and get it. There's a side of me that says that's what you ought to do if you got a good tax lawyer. There's another side of me that's saying this was a program that was implemented in the middle of a global pandemic when tens of thousands of Americans were dying. And it just seems to me that a good, well-run business could have looked at that and said, you know what, I'm not going to dig a deeper hole for this deficit because I can make my business work. Now, to be honest, if they're following the law, they should probably get it because we passed the bill. But there's some folks out there, I'm going, guys, you didn't need it. The nature of your business was not one that you needed. The lawyers got you a good credit and good on you. But that's passed. I'm not going to go way back before 2024. But I cannot imagine if a business has the resources where they can retain an attorney and try and get that tax dollars now, they probably weren't in much trouble. And what we were trying to do was help those that were desperate. So I feel like there was some abuse there, and I believe that the House mark is a good one. I was going to ask you, direct filing program, I hope you're okay with us killing that. We should have never had it. There are free filing programs out there. Direct file needs to go away. I think that that's in the House mark. That is good news. And I wanted to talk to you about some of my concerns with the president's priorities on non-pro-growth tax policy, but I'll just submit them for the record. Thank you.
Okay, and I never did give my wife that sandwich.
Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Long, several of my questions are yes or no's, and so just trying to help my colleagues are going to go after me be able to get their time as well, so appreciate your support there. Over 850 of my constituents have written in concerned that their private data is at risk after the Department of Government Efficiency sought access to sensitive IRS data systems. I'm also concerned that the state of New Mexico's bank records also could be inadvertently disclosed were Doge to gain access to those systems. Mr. Long, yes or no, should the IRS commissioner have access to the integrated data retrieval system and my constituents' private taxpayer data?
I think that we have to protect taxpayer data at all costs, so whatever that looks like, whatever that takes.
Well, historically, political officials, including the IRS commissioner, do not have access to this data. The law was changed after Watergate. I don't have to get into that anymore. Yes or no, do you believe the Department of Government Efficiency should have access to the integrated data retrieval system and my constituents' private taxpayer data?
I don't think that anyone's taxpayer data should be released to anyone that it doesn't need it for legitimate purposes.
I appreciate
of
that.
The IRS.
Yes or no, have you met with Ryan Wonderly, the Doge employee that has been granted access to Treasury Department data systems?
Never heard the name, no, sir.
I appreciate that. If people, well, let me ask the question this way, Mr. Long. When Doge releases the personal tax information of any person, should that person go to prison the same way that the person that released Donald Trump's tax returns went to prison for 5 years?
Say that again. I'm having a little trouble hearing.
When Doge releases the personal tax information of any person, should that person that released the data go to prison like the person that released Donald Trump's tax returns went to prison for 5 years?
I'm not familiar with the specific situation. So if I'm going to follow the law wherever the law takes it, so if it's illegal, it's illegal. If it's not, it's not.
Are you aware that someone went to prison for releasing Donald Trump's tax returns and a few other people for 5 years?
Is this the Little John that released everybody's?
Mr. Grassley's the one that asked the question.
Huh?
Chuck Grassley's the one that asked the question.
No, I'm asking.
There was agreement when Chuck asked it.
Isn't his name Little John? Is this the same instance you're talking about or not? That released everybody's and went to prison for 5 years? Is that?
Yeah, the person that went to prison for 5 years for that and for releasing Donald Trump's tax returns.
Same person?
Are you aware they went to prison for 5 years, Billy?
I'm aware that someone was sentenced to 5 years. I thought it was for a massive.
Sure, yeah.
I thought it was
for releasing tax information. So my question is, when Doge releases tax information of my constituents or any constituents in America, should that person go to prison?
If it's illegal.
Well, it's illegal. Someone went to prison for doing it for Donald Trump. Should they do it for a constituent down the road that works on a dairy in my town?
It's either legal or
all right.
illegal.
Well, we'll move on. I hope that's something. I'll submit it in writing so you can check with the lawyers, and I'll get an answer that way.
Yeah, you bet.
Sir.
I'll get it for you.
By the way, is the person that's going to be your chief counsel in the room today?
I'm sorry?
Is the person that's going to be your chief lawyer, your head lawyer, your top lawyer as IRS commissioner, are they in the room today?
I don't know who's going to be the.
You said someone might be earlier when someone else asked a question. You don't know who it might be?
I don't.
All right, I'll get to that later.
I don't see them. I don't think they're here, but.
One of my colleagues asked a question about being able to file taxes for free directly. Yes or no, do you support the ability of Americans to file their taxes directly for free through the direct file program?
That is something we discussed at length earlier, and there's a lot of, that's one of the first things I want to look at, as I said earlier, is, bring the evidence in and let us jury it and see. There's people on both sides of that. As you know, it's one of the hottest topics in the IRS.
Let me ask the question this way. Should Americans be able to file their taxes directly for free?
They should be able to get their audits done and know where their audit is. So as far as filing, I don't, a lot of people, I think, file for free now, don't they?
Should people be able to file for free?
If they could, sure. I mean, if they have to pay if they're capable of doing their own taxes, why would they have to?
Representative, I have other questions. I'll ask these a little bit later, sir. Billy, you and I come from small towns. We're simple folks. You're an auctioneer. I grew up on a small farm. People like it straight, man. People want to hear the truth. They just want to hear it straight. That's the relationship you and I have. When I was in the House with you, we didn't vote the same a lot.
But we worked on bills together.
We worked on bills together.
Yeah, we worked on bills together.
We always had honest conversations. You always kept your word. That's all that I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
I'm the same guy I was then, and
That's all that I'm trying to get to the bottom of here, Representative Long. That's it. is when we're talking about the IRS, like my colleagues kept asking questions about, are you going to make sure someone at the IRS can pick up a phone? Well, Elon Musk and Doge say that there's going to be a 40% reduction in force. The reason no one's over there answering phones is because of Elon Musk, and President Trump let it happen. Even one of my Republican colleagues said things were better 6 months ago. Well, I don't know who the president was 6 months ago, but it wasn't Donald Trump. All I'm saying is let's be honest with folks back at home, especially the folks that live on those small towns down a dirt road that you and I both know, sir. That's all that I'm asking. I appreciate the time, Mr. Chairman.
We've always had a good
Senator
relationship, and I appreciate it.
Senator Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. Good to see you. I served with you in the House, too, and it's good to see you. I'm concerned about a couple of things with the IRS. Number one, we've got a lot of folks who have not paid their taxes, and the estimates are that it's up to about $700 billion. And there's a divide in Congress as to what to do about that. And my view is that we should collect those taxes, and there's been significant personnel cuts. What are you going to do to make certain that folks who owe taxes pay them? And I'm talking particularly focusing on the very, very wealthy, many of whom haven't even filed taxes at all.
I think that everyone has to be, it's a voluntary system, but we have to make it compatible to where they can.
Right. I'm asking you concretely, what are you going to do as commissioner to make sure we go after them?
When we
How
start,
will you do it when there's
when I sit down with people over there and we come up with, I've heard all kinds of stories about the new technology and analytics that can sort these people out and decide that somebody needs to be audited. And I would think that the professionals that know the analytics and things.
Right, so you'll
I'm not trying to avoid. Am I answering your question? I don't.
No, well, you're telling me you'll figure it out when you get there and try to use the best tools available. So thank you. President Trump has said that he's told reporters and he's tweeted that Harvard University should lose its tax-exempt status. Do you agree with the president?
I have not been to the IRS. I haven't talked to the president about that, but I don't know enough. All I've seen a little bit of what I read in the paper about it. So yeah, I don't. We had that discussion earlier, and I think with Senator Warren about if it's illegal, it's illegal, and if it's legal, it's legal.
No, but this is an opinion that the president has expressed, that Harvard should lose its tax-exempt status. Do you agree with that?
It's if it's legal and something needs to be done, but if it's not, you can't do something illegal.
I'm not asking whether it's legal or not. I'm asking
I don't know. I haven't studied anything about Harvard. I don't,
Well, look, you're very well informed, and the administration President Trump is very specifically going after higher education. There have been significant cuts in research funding to Columbia, to Harvard, and to other universities. And the president, who will be your boss, has explicitly stated that he wants to eliminate the tax-exempt status for Harvard University. What's your opinion about the recommendation by the president that Harvard University lose its tax-exempt status?
Like I said, I'm not over there. I haven't looked at it or seen why they would think that, but it's something that I want to get into and figure out once I'm over there. I've never been around it, so I don't know.
But one of the concerns here is that if a president is using the IRS as a tool,
should not be done. Should not be done by anybody. I mean,
so you will tell President Trump to pound sand if he comes and asks you as commissioner.
That's my understanding, but it's like I said, if it's fair or not fair, legal, not legal. So if what you're saying is not legal, it should not be done, and he shouldn't be, or anybody shouldn't be able to do that.
Well, the president is not restrained by what's legal and not. He is.
Is your mic on? I'm sorry. Is your mic on?
It is. I'm sorry if I couldn't hear.
Can't.
The president is explicitly stating that he wants to go after Harvard, and what higher education institution is next, and you're going to be in the line of fire on that. And what I'm looking for from you is not something you're able to give me right now, and that's assurance he'll tell the president no when he is using the IRS for a political objective.
I said earlier that the IRS should not be politicized on my watch or any watch.
Okay, the other thing that I want to emphasize is service. There's an enormous wait time. It's unbelievable what DOJ did. Ideally, if you or anyone else is going to be the IRS commissioner, they'd be given the opportunity to come in, check out the situation, devise a plan on how to make it more efficient. You're coming in after the DOJ wrecking ball has already been there. Over 11,000 people are gone. And do you have an assessment of the capacity with the current personnel to be answering the phone and providing service to American citizens and all across our country? Or do you have an opinion about the need to restore some of these positions to the IRS to do its job?
My opinion is that the phone service that I've been given to understand is lousy. Earlier I was talking about a fellow that contacted me. He waited 2.5 hours on the phone about his 25 quarterlies, and it wasn't a dispute on the amount. It was just something about filing or whatever. He waited 2.5 hours, and he said I had to get some information, W-2 or something. So after 2.5 hours, when the lady picked up, he asked him to go and after 12 minutes, she informed him he didn't have time to talk to him.
All right, I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Whitehouse.
Thanks very much, Representative Long. Welcome to the committee. The taxpayer advocate in Rhode Island noticed that service dramatically improved for regular taxpayers when the additional funding for the IRS came through to the IRS, that wait times diminished, that they could get answers much more quickly. Will you work with the taxpayer advocates and listen to them to make sure that their advice is heard in your office?
Definitely. We had a little bit of a discussion on that earlier, and a lot of people still think I'm in Congress, so they still contact me with their issues. And I say, I'm not at the IRS, I can't talk about tax issues, and then I'll chat GPT, the taxpayer advocate service in their state, and there's 2 or 3 offices, 6 or 7 firms, and I've had very good response that they said that was helpful.
What will your policy be if you're asked by political higher-ups, say at the White House, to use the IRS against perceived political
It's not going to happen. That's
how do we know
on my watch? Huh?
How will we know it's not going to happen? Are there any guardrails you'll set up to make sure that that doesn't happen?
And I guess you got to figure out if I'm telling you the truth or not, but it's not going to happen on my watch. I mean, Congressman, and there's 9 people on your 27-person committee here that I served with in the House for 12 years, most of them for 12 years.
Yeah. Will you at least make that policy clear? Will you promise to make that policy clear when you get to the IRS?
Yes,
because
there's a lot of things I want to make.
We do with the Department of Justice.
Sir?
One of the things about the Department of Justice is that they're very scrupulous about not letting little squirrels running around in the White House talk to little squirrels running around in the Department of Justice and influence prosecutions without the Attorney General or the Deputy Attorney General knowing about it. Will you look at making sure in some kind of internal policy statement that you're not being circumvented with some person employed by you being told by the White House, let's go screw this person, and you don't know about it? And then they say, well, there's no policy. The IRS commissioner never said anything about that.
If I'm being circumvented, then I'm not the commissioner of the IRS. I mean, so that should not happen.
All right. Well, make sure that it doesn't, because there'll be every incentive to try to push it. We've seen the president do it with Harvard. You had questions about that already. We were told in the Finance Committee that the tax credit that you were helping these private individuals to hawk, quote, the tax credit does not exist. If you get to the IRS, what are you going to do about that?
Senator Wyden and another senator have already started an investigation, and is my way of thinking. And whatever my OGE says, since I did refer some friends to Capital Edge Strategies who, if I can, I mean, anybody that's doing anything illegal should be investigated. It just, I mean, it's common sense.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that we now have an IRS employee who has said this tax credit that you've been hawking does not exist. And I'm wondering what they can expect by way of retaliation for having said that once you come in.
None.
All right.
I'm not, you know.
So one other thing, let me look at your donations here. The political stuff, I think we've been over this before, but if you could pull it up. So you lost your Senate primary, you carried $130,000 in debt as of August 2nd, 2022, correct? Then time goes by and none of that gets paid down. In fact, 2 years and 5 months go by, nearly 30 months. It's a pretty good long period of time, to December 4th, when suddenly it's announced that you're about to be the IRS commissioner. And after 2 years and 5 months of no activity, suddenly, starting the following day and just in the next 2 months, suddenly $165,000 floods in. Will you share with us all the communications with those donors by you or any known intermediary of yours that prompted that sudden flood of donations that ended up in your personal pocket?
As I've mentioned several times today, everything that you do with the Federal Election Commission, you have to do it by the book, by their rules, and that's exactly what I did. We followed the letter of the law with the FEC. If this stuff needs to be changed, then you need to change what the FEC does or how that.
This is different. This isn't just complying with the FEC. This is a Senate hearing about whether you should be the IRS commissioner or not. And if you started using the office of IRS commissioner to solicit funds back then, that's the kind of thing that would be shown in the communications by you or intermediaries with these individuals. Will you promise to share with the committee any communications related to that sudden surge of contributions to you?
I'll share what we shared with the FEC. I mean, everything had to be reported. Everything had to be public. It wasn't like I thought, oh, you know, these people are sending money in and now, you know,
well,
I mean, it's in the public record. So
we all know here that what you file with the FEC versus what happens when you conduct an investigation and look back behind the filings and look at the communications and the memos and the phone call records, whatever took place. I think we're entitled in this situation, Chairman, by the way, happy birthday.
Thank you.
You know, have a look at that as if there were an investigation going on and to see the actual documents behind all of this. And so that will be my ask, and my time, as I said, is expired.
Thank you. Senator Daines.
Congressman Long, good to see you here today. I have great memories of the time that we served together in the U.S. House. Very proud to see you here today as our next Commissioner of the IRS. Congratulations on your nomination.
Thank you.
And your continued commitment to public service. Well, it goes without saying the role of the IRS Commissioner is very important. Well, nobody wants to pay taxes. When they do, they want to have the experience as seamless a process as possible. At the very least, they expect to avoid political games. Unfortunately, during the Biden administration, the IRS suffered a massive leak of confidential taxpayer information. A politically motivated contractor managed to disclose thousands of returns without authorization. The same administration allowed unannounced home visits under false pretenses and raids on small businesses to collect non-financial documents, including my state of Montana. This is why last Congress, I introduced legislation to increase penalties for individuals who unlawfully disclose taxpayer information. We need to make sure that people are held accountable for breaking the law, but it's more important to avoid these disclosures in the first place. Congressman Long, if confirmed, do you commit to protecting sensitive taxpayer information?
Yes.
You know, Montanans rely on IRS field offices when they encounter an issue and they need quick answers. We had some experiences here, in fact, in this committee, where I had my staff call into the IRS helpline. And, you know, at least you'd expect maybe some bad 70s music for the hold music. It wasn't even bad 70s music. It was worse. And they were on hold for nearly an hour, listening to some really bad elevator music, only then to be disconnected. My staff works closely with the field offices to get timely and substantive answers to difficult questions and situations. It's important these offices run as smoothly as possible and provide the level of service that taxpayers pay for and deserve. Congressman Long, if confirmed, how will you strengthen the workforce at the IRS to provide strong customer service?
I earlier had mentioned that, and I don't know anybody else that would do this or even think of it, but I have pledged to arrive 90 minutes before the office opens here and in Montana. You may not see me much in D.C. if I am confirmed, because I'm going to be traveling all around the country to these different offices and building a culture that people want, instead of looking at their watch and saying, I've got 3 years, 4 days, and 12 minutes before I retire, I got to get out of this place, I hate it. I want them to be anxious to come into work in the morning. I want to build the culture and help my employee partners to where they're like, nobody ever asked our opinion on anything, ever. In 27 years I've been here, in 7 years and 7 months, I've never been invited up to the third floor where the commissioner is. Mm-hmm. And the taxpayers need the same level of service. And if you get this group happy and this group happy where they're not afraid of each other, I don't want either side to be intimidated in that equation. And I think that that's how you improve service at the IRS. And this thing about calls, I talked earlier, there was a 2.5 hour, just 4 or 5 days ago, a guy contacted me, waited 2.5 hours on the phone. And when he got put through, the lady, after 12 minutes, she said, I don't have time for this. I don't have time for you. He gave me her name and her badge and I haven't done anything with it, but, you know, I'm not over there. But it's stinking thinking. I mean, everyone I've run into in D.C. at Treasury or OPM or wherever has been very, very pleasant. And they all speak and they seem to be happy with what they do. I know there's some have taken the early out or whatever, but I think that if they know somebody's at the helm at the IRS that cares about them and cares about their life and wants their opinion, I think a light bulb will turn on and we can get it from the cellar up to the second or third floor as far as what they're, if they feel better about themselves and about their job, you don't think they're going to treat people better on the outside. And I may be tilting at windmills, but I really think that that's what it takes is a new culture, a new attitude. And like Charles Rossetti, buy some rubber stoppers for the door and keep your door open where people can have access to see who's in there.
Congressman, thank you. It'll be a refreshing change. My grandmother had to pick up a job because my grandpa didn't make much of a living, and later on in life she went to work for the IRS and was a dedicated federal employee for many, many years. And she woke up every day. She got in there early, went home late. My grandma always told me, you know, count your blessings. She was a positive person, and I'm sure she was a great, passionate service agent for taxpayers. And so my point is that I think you were going to, I'll be honest something here. There's a lot of dedicated federal employees that want to do the right thing, and they show up every day. They're grateful for the work. They just need a leader here that respects them and empowers them. As you said, takes it out of the basement here and brings them up and treats them as peers versus second-class citizens. And that kind of leadership is needed, and I'm confident you'll deliver that.
My dad never had a bad day. I mean, he was the most, I was telling Senator Wyden the other day that he got drafted for the BAA, the Basketball Association of America, to play. As Senator Wyden, that was his lifelong dream to play professionally. He had some health things that didn't allow him to do that. But Dad was always positive, always upbeat, never had a bad day, just like your grandmother. And people, if you treat them, I like people. I like the left side. I like the right side. If people will give me a chance to show what I can do, I think we can do some very successful things at the IRS.
Senator Warnock.
All
right. Thank you, Commissioner.
Senator Warnock.
Thank you, Chairman Crapo. Happy birthday. And I hope you get some time after this hearing with your family and your friends. But blessings to you. Congressman Long, Americans deserve fair treatment from the IRS. No one should be favored for their wealth or connections, nor should anyone be targeted for their political views. Sadly, sadly, attempts to weaponize the IRS are not new. We've seen this time and time again in our history. In the 1970s, President Nixon repeatedly tried to use the IRS to investigate his enemies, who included civil rights leaders, it included journalists, and even members of Congress. Luckily, multiple IRS commissioners refused to carry out the president's orders. These public servants, in my view, are American heroes. They put the rule of law above partisan politics, and in a real sense, they put it above their careers. They were focused on what's right. And in response, to their principled stand, Congress passed a law on a bipartisan basis, to prohibit any president from directing the IRS to target any taxpayer. Thank you so very much. I enjoyed meeting with you in my office last week, and when we met, you and I discussed how President Trump has called for auditing Harvard University because of their political stances. We also talked about how an administration official suggested that the IRS should stop auditing some of the president's top political allies, including Mike Lindell. And so I just have a few yes or no questions for you, and I want to get through this. This is why I'm just going to ask you some yes or no questions. You told me that if you got a request from the president, to audit a taxpayer, you'd follow the law and ignore that request. Is that correct, yes or no?
It's partially correct. I think that I told you he wouldn't do that in the first place, but if he did, I'd do exactly what you said, so yes.
The answer would be
yes.
Yes,
yeah.
Okay. You also told me that if you got a request from the president to halt an audit on one of his friends or allies, you'd follow the law and you'd ignore that request as well. Is that still correct, yes or no?
Yes.
You also said you would report those illegal requests to the Treasury Inspector General. Is that correct?
The IG's office, yeah, we talked about that. Yes, sir.
You would report it to the IG office of for the Treasury Inspector General. Great. And that you would report such requests to the Senate Finance Committee, both the chair and the ranking member. Is that still correct?
If that's what is protocol, yes.
It's not just the president who can exert enormous influence over the IRS. Clearly, the president could. After your nomination to head up the IRS, you received nearly $200,000 in campaign contributions, including from tax preparation firms who might have committed tax fraud. When we met, I asked if you would recuse yourself from decisions involving those donors. You very clearly said that you would not recuse yourself. That's what you said to me a few days ago, but it's been a few days, so I want to ask again, for the record, is it still your testimony that you will not recuse yourself from investigations involving these campaign donors?
I'm not going to deal in hypotheticals, but the OGE report, or whatever it's called, that I signed has very specific things on what I could be involved in and not. So I'm going to go with the OGE that I signed.
Do you think that in the matter of public service, perception matters, that taxpayers, that American taxpayers should have confidence that you are making decisions based on what's right for them and not what's right for you? Do you think that's...
If I wanted what was right for me, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today. But, yeah.
Well, you chose to sit there, which is why I'm asking you the question.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, yeah.
So perception matters in terms of the public trust.
Right. Perception's reality in the mind of the perceiver, sure.
I'm out of time, so thank you very much.
Thank you for the time in the office. I really, really enjoyed that meeting.
Thank you.
And thank you.
Thank you. Senator Wyden has asked for one more round, and so he will ask his round of questions, and then we'll be close to wrapping up.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I just want to go over one point that's come out and then have a last matter to talk about with Mr. Long. Several of our colleagues have expressed concern about the IRS improperly leaking data. I very much share those concerns, and I want to make 3 points. First, the leak of taxpayer data to ProPublica happened during the first Trump administration, 1. 2, the contractor who leaked the information, a gentleman named Mr. Littlejohn, is now in jail serving a 5-year term. 3, the IRS under Donald Trump has agreed to share taxpayer information with the Homeland Security Department, and if you're concerned about taxpayer privacy, you sure as heck ought to be concerned about that. So, Mr. Long, the reason you've been getting all these questions from my colleagues with respect to this $165,000 in campaign donations after the announcement that you had been nominated is the concern about the possibility that promises were made in exchange for that money. I just want to give you the chance to go over this with me. Did you promise any tax promoter you would help them if you got confirmed?
I can answer that with an affirmative no.
Okay. So you didn't meet with anybody when you were in town for the inauguration and promised them a private letter arrangement or something like that?
A private letter arrangement,
where you say, we're going to help. We're going to help you if I'm confirmed.
I haven't promised anybody a letter of any type that I can think of.
Okay.
And I was in my room for about 50 hours because I had food poisoning during the inauguration, so I didn't talk to many people.
Okay. Mr. Long, our staff investigators have on tape now a tax promoter saying you met with him at the inauguration and promised him a favorable private letter ruling. We also have on tape the White River CFO who gave you the thousands of dollars that he expects favorable treatment of these fake tribal credits. So that's why I'm so troubled by this argument you've given today that, well, you can go over to the FEC and see things. That money doesn't just fall out of the sky and land at the FEC, and that's why these taped conversations are so troubling to me. And I'm just going to close with this. As I've indicated, I think that whether you want to call yourself gregarious or entertaining, you're definitely that. That's not what's at issue today. What's at issue is the question of peddling fake tax credits, scamming small businesses, this questionable array of campaign contributions. And I will tell you, listening to the colleagues who asked you these questions and saw the extent to which you tried to avoid answering it suggests to me a record that reflects somebody who's been up to their eyeballs in this questionable behavior. And that's why I'm voting against your nomination. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And I have no further questions, Congressman Long. Thank you again for appearing before us today. You've been here nearly 2.5 hours, and I'm tempted to, well, I will say this is just your most recent 2.5-hour session. I appreciate your going through our extensive vetting process with us. And this completes the hearing today. We will move forward with the vote on your nomination at a time to be determined. I urge all of my colleagues to support you at that time. With that in mind, I remind my colleagues that the deadline for submitting any questions for the record is 5 p.m. on Friday, May 23rd. And with that, the Finance Committee stands adjourned.
Thank you. Thank you for your time.